Oh, hey! Welcome to Flynndogg Woodwork. So I know you've all eyeballed them before, but there's a lot of cheaper options to some of your more popular woodworking brands. Brands like Woodpeckers, Festool, Amana, and even Kreg. And I just spent $200 on some of these knockoffs. So let's take a look at them and see if they're any good. So this video's a tribute to the good old days when you'd have that one aisle in the grocery store where all the labels were black and white. That's right, the kind of cans that I used to be embarrassed by when I'd see them in the pantry as a kid. But now that I'm an adult, I totally get it, as I'm guessing most of us have some brands like Great Value in our pantry today, which is essentially the same thing. But are there any brands like Great Value for woodworking? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. I bought 6 alternative tools to many higher end brands, and we're going to compare these knockoffs to the original tools. So let's not waste any more time and dig into our first item. And this first item is probably one of the items that I'm most excited about, as it's something that I've been wanting to get for my track saw for a long time. And in my case, I have a Festool track saw, and I have no regrets purchasing this high-end tool, as it's been a true game changer for breaking down things like sheets of plywood. And when I purchased this track saw, it came with one 55-inch piece of track, which is great for cutting 4x8 pieces of plywood in half, but not so much the long way. So I've been in the market to get more track for this saw for quite some time. The problem is the Festool brand for this track is outrageously priced. In order to get 110 inches of more track, the cheapest that I've been able to find is $358. And until recently, I thought I had to use that Festool branded track in order to use this track saw appropriately. But that's just not the case. So I did a little bit of digging and I found 110 inches of track at 19% of that Festool brand. You heard me right, 19% of the cost of the Festool brand at $69. So let's see how it compares. So this is the Wen 110-inch track saw track. Let's unbox it and see how it compares. So inside the box, you're going to get 2 pieces of 55-inch track, along with 2 locking mechanisms and an Allen key so that you can attach the 2 pieces of track together. Now right off the bat, I'm pretty pleased here, as I'm seeing no discernible difference between the Festool track and the Wen tracks. If we look at the top of the 2 tracks, you'll notice that both items have a plastic ribbon that runs down the entire length of the track. This allows your track saw to easily glide on that track. You'll also notice that there's T-slots on both items that allow you to attach accessories. If we look at the end of the track, you can see they have a very similar profile. They both use the same thickness of aluminum, and the only difference I can see between the 2 tracks is this little notch on the very end of the Wen. Now let's flip those tracks around and check out the bottom. And once again, I'm seeing very little difference between the 2 tracks. You can see they both have that foam grip that allows you to secure the track to your workpiece. You'll also notice they both have a T-slot as well as the ripping guide that you align your saw with. Now many of you may be saying that I don't have a Festool track saw, but that's okay because this Wen system is compatible with most major brands. Just take a look at all the brands it's compatible with. That's a lot of brands. Before we do anything else, I want to take my Festool track saw and place it on the Wen track. And as you can see, it fits very nicely and glides very smoothly. Now if you're getting any sort of slop with your track saw, you can always make micro adjustments to your saw to make sure you're nice and secure. Now just like with any new track, you'll need to cut down your ripping guide so that you can make sure that your track is perfectly aligned. Now that we have both those tracks cut to size, let's take a look at how they come together. And they really do come together quite simply. You simply slide the locking mechanism into both T-slots and then you can lock it into place with the Allen key. Once you have that locking mechanism installed on the top, you can flip the track around and do the same thing on the bottom. So my first question is, what's that transition like for your track saw? Well, let's check it out. And in fact, I'm quite impressed. It is extremely smooth and I can't even tell the difference of when I'm going from one track to the other. My next question is, how straight is this thing over the entire 110-inch length? Now this will be a little bit difficult to test, but I do have an 8-foot level that we can place up against it. And this is about as good as it gets. I'm not seeing any daylight in between the level and the track. Now before you attach the two tracks, it would be an excellent idea to use something like a level to make sure that you're getting it entirely straight when you're attaching the two tracks together. One of the last things that I want to do is to attach this Wen track to the Festool track and see how well they work together. Now although they won't fit together as well as the two Wens, they will work with each other. You can see there's no daylight in between the two tracks, and I can easily move the track saw back and forth. You will, however, hear an audible click as it moves from one track to the other. Well, I couldn't be more pleased with how these Wen tracks work with the Festool system, and I have to assume if they work this well with Festool, they're going to work that well with any other brand. And at 19% of the cost of those Festool tracks, these are really a no-brainer in my opinion. But we're not done with these tracks yet. Let's move on to our second item, which is an accessory for these tracks and hopefully the Festool track as well. So our next item we're going to take a look at is a clamp, and if you know anything about tracksaw clamps, they can tend to be quite expensive. Now I've got a few of these clamps already. One of the first clamps that I got is this Festool clamp, and this clamp costs about $48 for just one clamp. Now I really don't like this clamp that much, as it's got a ratcheting system and it can really tend to slip on you. The second clamp and my preferred clamp is the micro jig clamp. And this costs about $20, and it's got a nice feature that you can really screw it into place. Lastly, I tried to save a few bucks by going to Temu, and I bought this clamp for about $12. But what if I were to tell you I found an even cheaper clamp than the one that I found on Temu, and it's made by a reputable brand that you can purchase on Amazon? Well, that's exactly what I found, so let's dig into it and see what I got next. So once again, this is a tool made by Wen. These are the Wen tracksaw clamps. Let's check them out. So inside the box, you're going to get a set of two 6-inch Wen tracksaw clamps. Let's take a closer look at their design. As to be expected, you're getting a spread of 6 inches exactly for the Wen, while the Festool has about 6.5 inches and the micro jig comes in at about 5.5. If you look at the design of the clamp, you'll realize we're not dealing with a screw clamp or a ratcheting clamp. This is actually functioning much more like a quick clamp. If we look at the handle of the clamp, you'll notice that there's two orange knobs. The larger of the two allows you to cinch the clamp into place, while the smaller one allows you to loosen it. You'll also notice, unlike all my other tracksaw clamps with an L design, the Wen actually has a T design, and this will actually give support to your track not only in the front of the clamp, but also in the back a little bit. Unfortunately, however, this T-shaped design will take away one function of this clamp. As the L-shaped design will allow those clamps to easily slide into MFT tables, the T design simply won't fit. So this will have to be a dedicated tracksaw clamp. So let's test it out and see how well it works. First, we'll try it out with that new Wen track, and as you can see, it quickly slides into place and can be easily cinched down. Now let's try that Wen clamp with the Festool track. And just like with that Wen track, it quickly and easily slides right into place. And I'm assuming that since these clamps work both with the Festool track as well as the Wen track, these are going to work with most major brands. And for $16 for two clamps, this is something that's worth taking a look at. And the only bummer about these clamps is they're just not designed to fit into bench dog holes. Well, that takes us through our first two items of the day, and Wen is absolutely killing it so far. But we've got some other brands to take a look at, so let's take a look at our third item. Well, we've already found a couple of alternatives to some Festool products, but it wouldn't be a Flynndogg woodwork video if I didn't find an alternative to some Woodpeckers tools.
What?
And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Now, one tool that's really grown on me from Woodpeckers over the last few years is the Paolini pocket rule. Now right here I've got the stainless steel variety, and this costs about $165. They also make an aluminum variety, and that's about $140. So I thought it was worth taking a look at some of these cheaper brands that you see on Amazon all the time and see if they're any good. And this knockoff pocket rule set is very comparable to the aluminum set made by Woodpeckers, only it costs less than $32. That's 22% of the cost of the aluminum variety made by the name brand. But is it any good? Well, that's what we're going to find out. So let's go grab this next tool. So this next tool is the Neitra pocket rule set. Let's dig into it and see how it looks. So instead of being a flashy red tool, this is a flashy orange tool, and I'm really quite impressed with the packaging, but let's take it out and see what it looks like. So just like with the Woodpeckers, in this set you get a 6-inch, an 8-inch, as well as a 12-inch pocket rule, but you also get this little accessory that we'll take a look at in a minute. If we place both 6-inch rulers side by side, you can see they're quite similar. They both have 16th inch increments on one side as well as 30 seconds on the other. You'll also notice that they both have 2 locking knobs to hold the ruler in place. You'll also notice that they both have a bird's mouth on the very end to place your pencil. Now, since I don't have the Woodpeckers aluminum pocket rule, I can't really compare apples to apples. However, in looking at these two squares, there is a significant difference between the adjustable lip. Not only is the Neitra lip a little bit longer, but it's also 1/4 of an inch wider, which will make significant differences in the stability of this tool. Another significant difference from what I've seen is that Woodpeckers only offers this tool in either imperial or metric, not both. But if we flip that Neitra around, you can not only see there's 1/16 of an inch in imperial on one side, but also millimeters. Another great feature of the Paolini pocket rule is the ability to set it on its edge. This is great for setup for things like your router table or your table saw. And just like the Woodpeckers, the Neitra also has this functionality. You can slide the collar off, slide it into the hole, and then you can get your vertical readings. Now earlier, we caught a glimpse of an accessory that comes with this Neitra set. Let's take a closer look at what that does. That accessory is a 3/4 of an inch wide collar that allows you to slide your ruler into place so that you can get either a 30° or 45° marking. So as you can see, all the functionality that we look for in the Woodpeckers pocket rule appears to be available with this Neitra, and even a couple of more features. But none of this matters whatsoever unless this thing is square. So let's go ahead and test for square. And to do this, I'm going to take the longest ruler, or the 12-inch ruler, with a collar all the way at the bottom. I'll strike a line, flip it over, and then strike another line. And that, in my opinion, is perfectly square. Well, now I'm kicking myself, as this appears to be just as accurate as that Paolini pocket rule at only a fraction of the price. And frankly, I'm beginning to realize after doing all these tool reviews that I've spent a lot of money in my shop on those fancy names when I really didn't need to. But we're not done yet. We've got 3 more knockoff brands to take a look at, so let's see if we can continue the trend. But before we dig into our 4th knockoff, I ask you to do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this small woodworking channel. Also, for all the tools we're taking a look at, just like with all my videos, I'll leave links in the description below, so if any of these interest you, you can go check them out there. Lastly, I've got my new website, www.flynndoggwoodwork.com. There you can find shop updates as well as some tool recommendations and some fun merchandise. I've really had a lot of fun making the merchandise on the website, so if you're like me and you like to have fun with woodworking, check out www.flynndoggwoodwork.com. There you'll find all the t-shirts that I wear in my videos. Now let's move on to our 4th item. So for our 4th item of the day, I've actually got a couple of options, and that's because I've spent a lot of time behind a screen doing you know what, trying to find some alternatives. And I featured one of these options a couple of weeks ago, but if you missed that video, I thought it was worth taking a look at it again in case you missed that video. But I do have a new option. So what is this next item? Well, it's an option for a drill bit, a $43 drill bit. And you guessed it, it's the Amana Countersink bit. Now I have no complaints about this tool other than the price. You shouldn't have to have buyer's remorse when you're buying a drill bit. And that's why I want to show off these next 2 alternatives, so let's go grab them. So these next 2 Countersink bits are made by a brand called Ezen, as well as another brand that doesn't even have a name. So let's first talk about the Ezen brand, as this is a brand that I've been using for a couple of years and I've been really impressed with its quality and its functionality. And any tool that I purchase more than once is a tool that I like to show off, so let's get it out of the box and take a look at its features. One of the most impressive things about this Ezen brand is the ability to adjust the depth of your countersink on the fly. If we take a look at my new blue one, you'll notice that the only difference between the old one and the new one is the gauge of the drill bit. You'll also notice that the old one is sticking out just a little bit further than the new one. To adjust the depth of your drill bit, they give you a hex key. Let me show you how to adjust it. By loosening the bolt on the side with the hex key, you can really see how much you can adjust this bit. And the depth adjustment for the drill bit works in a very similar fashion to the Amana. The real power of the Ezen countersink bit has everything to do with adjusting the depth of the countersink on the fly. And that's where this spring and this little dial come into play. By simply twisting that dial, you can easily expose more and more of the chamfer for that countersink. Next, let's compare what's made this Amana bit so popular, the brake that doesn't mar your workpiece. And if we compare the two brakes, you can see the biggest difference is the size of them. You can see they're both made of aluminum and they both rotate freely from the drill bit. And just like with the Amana, the Ezen is perfect for getting those repeatable and accurate countersinks for every single hole. Now the Ezen itself may not be as expensive as the Amana countersink bit, but it isn't exactly cheap, coming in at about $36. But I did want to show it to you as I think the ability to be able to adjust the depth of that countersink bit is a really nice feature. And the Ezen has been my primary countersink bit over the Amana for the last couple years. But let's take a look at our second option for a countersink bit that's all about the price. This countersink comes in at $16 or about 38% of that Amana. And this is the bit that I featured a couple of weeks ago. This bit here costs $16, but there's a wide range of prices for this exact same bit, so you have to do a little bit of digging. Now I'll leave a link in the description below for this exact same bit so that you can see the $16 version. Since I just covered this bit a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to do a quick review of some of the features of this cheap bit. The biggest difference that you'll see between these two bits is the Amana has an aluminum brake while the no-name brand has a plastic brake. And just like the Ezen and the Amana, this bit is also carbide tipped. Not to mention, this bit is easily adjustable with a hex key on the side, and it even has a scale to set your depth. And once again, just like the Amana, this no-name brand allows you to repeat the depth of each one of your countersinks over and over again. So whether you're looking for a budget-friendly option or a bit that has just a little bit more flexibility than the Amana, either one of these bits would be an excellent choice. Well, that takes us through 4 items and only 2 more left to take a look at. Our next item is all about saving some money, so let's take a look at this knockoff and see how it compares to the real deal. So in order to compare this knockoff version to the real deal, I actually had to buy the real deal, and this is the Kreg 90-degree corner clamp, and this comes in at right about $50. And although I love every Kreg tool that I've ever purchased, it hurt me a little bit to buy this one, as I was able to find a lot of alternatives at a lot better prices. And since that's the point of this video, I found another set that came with 2 clamps for just a little over $42, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. So who makes this knockoff brand? Well, let's find out. So these are the Dragonite 90-degree corner clamps. Let's take a closer look at them and see how they compare to the Kreg. So my first impression with these Dragonite clamps is they look almost identical to the Kreg. The one advantage of these Dragonites is you get 2 of these for less than the price of one of the Kregs. After inspecting these clamps for a little bit, I can only really see 2 major differences between these clamps. One has to do with the handle locking system and the other has to do with the jaws of the clamps. Let's take a closer look. If we take a look at the handles of the 2 clamps, you'll notice that the Dragonite clamp has got a very familiar clamping system. If you turn the knob on the very bottom, it'll either increase or decrease the tension of the clamp. If you push the tab on the opposite side of the handle, it'll release the tension of the clamp. If we look at the Kreg, however, it's a little bit different mechanism. And that's because this is a Kreg Automax clamp. Now this clamp automatically adjusts to the thickness of your material and adjusts the tension accordingly. There is a little knob, however, that allows you to manually adjust the tension if you need to. And that tensioning knob is right at the base of the handle, and this is a little bit difficult to turn, but you really shouldn't have to adjust it that often. So this is kind of a nice feature to have if you're going back and forth between 2 different thicknesses of wood. It eliminates the process of having to manually adjust your clamp for each workpiece. Instead, you can move from material like 1/2-inch plywood to 3/4-inch plywood without any adjustments. Now let's compare the heads of the clamps or the clamping jaws. And here you can see the designs are quite similar, with an L-shaped bracket on the interior of the corner clamp and 2 flat surfaces on the exterior of the corner clamp. You'll notice that the Kreg has 2 little notches cut out, so let's take a look at what those are for. These little notches are to allow you to place your Robertson bit into the pocket hole so that you can drive in the screws. You just need to make sure that your pocket holes are in line with the notch. And you can see the difference between the Dragonite, which doesn't have that notch, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get your Robertson bit in there. But for less than half the price and the fact that you get 2 clamps instead of 1, I'm willing to sacrifice some of those added features with the Kreg. As in the end, I'm going to get the same results with either one of these clamps, and I think I'd rather get 2 clamps for the price of 1 versus having the added features of the little notch and the quick adjustability. So once again, another value knockoff made by Dragonite that I think is worth taking a look at. Well, that takes us through 5 of our 6 items and only 1 more item left to take a look at. Our next item is also a clamp, and it's also a Kreg knockoff. So let's see if this next item does just as well as that Dragonite did. So fortunately, unlike the Kreg AutoMax corner clamp, this is a clamp that I already had in my inventory, and this is the Kreg 90-degree clamp. This is perfect when used in combination with pocket holes. But once again, we're dealing with a clamp that by itself costs about $45 for just one clamp. Now, if you've ever tried to set up a cabinet with pocket holes, you'll realize you need more than one of these. Now, they do sell sets of 2 of these, but they cost about $98. And obviously, that's a lot of money for one clamp, let alone 2 clamps. So I did a little bit of research on Amazon, and I found there's all sorts of alternatives out there. So I selected one, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. And this brand's got to have one of the coolest names I've seen in a while. So these clamps are the Monster & Master pocket hole clamps. Let's see how they compare to those Kregs. So first off, these clamps cost $38, which is 39% of the Kreg clamps that we're going to compare them to. If we take a look at the 2 clamps, you can see they have a very similar structure. They both have a 2-inch peg on one side of the clamp and a face clamp on the other side. If we look at the handles of the 2 clamps, you're going to see a very similar difference that we did with the Dragonite clamps. Once again, the Monster & Master has a standard tensioning adjustment that you see on many clamps, while the Kreg has the AutoMax system once again where you can adjust the tension with a small knob. So if you haven't used pocket hole clamps before, let me quickly show you how they work. When you have your pocket holes drilled out, you'll simply slide the peg into one of those pocket holes and place the face on the other side. Then you can lock the clamp into place. This will then allow you to screw in your other pocket hole screws, locking your corner into place. And when I'm clamping up pocket holes like this, I'm typically only using one size of material, typically 3/4 of an inch. And that pretty much negates the benefits of having the AutoMax system, as I'm not switching out from one thickness to another. Typically, I can set clamps like this to one thickness and have it be useful to me for the whole project. So once I set these Monster & Master clamps to the appropriate thickness, they're just as easy to use as the Kreg clamps. And it's because of this that I think it's absolutely worth taking a look at some of these knockoff brands or generic brands, as they produce the same results as some of the higher end brands. So what have I learned today? Well, first and foremost, I learned that you don't need a high-end tool brand to give you the results you need. If you're like me and you watch many of these popular YouTubers, you'll see them using all the high-end brands like Kreg, Amana, Woodpeckers, and even Festool. But the thing is, you don't need to have these high-end brands to get the results you want. Well, I thank you for joining me today on checking out some of these knockoff brands. This was a real eye-opener for me, and it just goes to show you don't need to pay top dollars for some of those high-end brands. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment. It really does help out this small woodworking channel. Also, make sure you check out my new website, www.flynndoggwoodwork.com. Until next time, take care as always.